It's a Tyler Survival Dispatch and TJAC Survival. I have my friend Oliver here. He spent some time in Ukraine, and we're going to have a little discussion on how we can prepare against a Red Dawn type scenario here in the U.S. based on his experience and my military experience. So stick with me. Okay, as many of you know, I've worked with special forces units. I've been in intelligence for years. I've been a military contractor, worked for three-letter agencies and traveled all over the Middle East. I've never been to Ukraine. So my friend Oliver here spent time in Ukraine as a civilian. And as we all know, it's an active war zone. There's a war going on right now. I want to call this video kind of an after action review. What can we learn from what's going on over there in order to prepare ourselves for if that ever happens here? So Oliver, introduce yourself real quick and tell them a little about yourself.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Oliver. I'm 23 years old currently. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and as a member of the church, we served 2-year missions. And back in 2018 to 2020, I served in the Baltic mission, which included Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and at the time, Belarus. And I served with lots of Ukrainians, so I got to know lots of Ukrainians. And we became good friends, and we became, I had a lot of people I would consider brothers from Ukraine. So I came home from that and started working, and then last year when the war started, I was in Arizona at the time, and I was just about to start a new business, and I was going to teach martial arts. And then my friend reached out to me and started talking about how there's these growing tensions, and they were trying to build up these survival kits. Actually, he was trying to help himself, his family, and his friends to build up a food storage, and they didn't have the money. So he was just reaching out to friends that he knew who might be able to help. So we started doing some fundraising efforts just to help them build a food storage. And this is 2 weeks prior to the invasion beginning. And then the invasion happened. So for 2 weeks, we had already been fundraising and doing all this stuff for our friends in Ukraine, me and a couple other people that I had served with in the Baltics. And then when the invasion happened, we started organizing these evacuation rides, and we started helping most of our friends try to escape and get into Germany, Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Sweden, other countries that they were trying to get into so that they could leave the war. And then that slowly turned into eventually the decision to actually go into Ukraine. So I was over there. I ended up there for 4 months, and yeah, it was just by the grace of God that everything happened, and the people that I met and the experiences we went through and the things that happened. So I'm excited for this time to talk about it. So thanks for having me.
So immediately I've got a bunch of stuff brainstorming through my head that I want to ask. So I have a little bit of unconventional warfare training from the military. I've both been taught unconventional warfare and done some instructing. And I've also spent a lot of time, like I said earlier, traveling in countries, but the majority of my time is actually as a contractor. So I've spent a lot of time by myself, living out of one roller bag with no support, which just kind of changes the whole dynamic. And the first thing that comes in my mind is, what were in these kits? Were they successful? And which countries were you going through, and how did you get out? And then I'll throw this again and I'll recap on this. What could people prepare? What could they get to prepare themselves? Like, what do you have in a bug out kit? What do you have in a shooter kit? What do you have? What can you do here in the US if we had an invasion of some sort happen here? How could we learn from the mistakes that happened there? And maybe I dumped too much information on you, but let's start out with those kits. What was in them, and did they work?
Yeah, so short answer is yes, they worked, but it took a second to get used to what we actually needed in them. I would say, as far as food goes, I'm going to keep it real simple and just say that there's, especially here in the States, we really like empty calories. but it's one of the most things you want to avoid when you're out there and when you're doing stuff and when you have this kind of emergency preparedness situation that you need to have calories. You need to have calories that matter for your body, and you need to have those nutrient dense foods. And they could be a variety of things. I'm not saying it had, I'm not like endorsing one type of granola bar or something. I'm just saying we spend way too much money and way too much time on empty calories. And if that stuff is in your kits right now, take that out. Anything like chips, any types of
It's like fast
candies that,
food.
yeah, fast food. Hard candies are good. That's kind of like the one exception. You want to have some sugary items sometimes, but for the most part, you want to get rid of those empty calories, especially empty beverages like sodas and stuff like that. You don't want that stuff. Obviously, if you have certain dietary things or diabetes or things like this where you have to watch your blood sugar, like that's personal, and you have to take that into account. But there were a few people and a few situations where we almost got in big trouble because someone's blood sugar was just dropping way too low, and they had diabetes and they didn't have the right equipment with them. They didn't have the insulin that they needed. That was a big problem. Luckily, at the time when I was with my friend who had this situation going on where his blood sugar was dropping, we were driving a van. We were in Poland. We were on our way to Ukraine, but he couldn't continue. He was going fast, and luckily his father pulled up, and he had this huge bag of Skittles, and he just gave it to his son, and his son just started eating all these Skittles, and within 20 minutes he was back to normal. But anyway, so it's really important that you make sure you understand your personal liabilities and for illnesses and diabetes and things like this. So that's the first thing with food. Second thing is, this one is a little bit harder because you never know when you're going to need it. So I would just suggest you start making it a habit to always have one with you. And it's something that I hardly ever see anyone with. And it's just a small little power bank, just a little battery pack. Okay, these battery packs, I bought a really good one for like $60, and that thing will recharge my phone from a completely dead battery about 7 times. And one time I used it for an entire week, and I didn't need to recharge the battery once. And for a whole week, it supplied all my energy needs for my phone. So it was perfect. So go get a battery, start carrying that on you. Definitely have one in your pack. And I'm just talking like the little batteries. You can buy one at Best Buy and stuff.
I have an
Those
Anchor
are,
battery that I've been
yeah,
using since I learned the hard way in the Colombian jungle years ago. I can
yep, that's the
attest.
one I have. Yep, Anchor, that's the one I have. It's a good brand. Highly
Real quick,
recommend.
what would you consider to be not empty calories? I mean, no chips, no sodas, that type of stuff. I get that. But if not that, then what?
Yeah, so you want to have some type of beef jerky. That's really, really essential because beef jerky, it doesn't weigh too much when you compare the amount of nutrients, protein, energy that it delivers. So definitely some type of dried meat, and it could be dried fish too, but dried red meat tends to be more, it tends to last longer for your system. Dried fish is a little more light and it doesn't give you quite as many calories and things like this. So some type of dried meat, some type of dried fruit and dried nuts, some
Fish is
type
a
of,
fruit anyway.
yeah, and some type of really hard grain. You can home make stuff too. It's a lot of fun, but they sell these like really hard, dense type cracker type things. Those are great to have in your kits. Anything that you think, how do you say, look at the ingredients, look at the little dietary packet things on all the packages, and just read how many calories this thing is going to give you, because that's important compared to how many sugars it has in it. You don't want to just have all these sugary things, but you don't not want to have any sugars. So I would say dried meats, nuts and berries, dried also, some type of hard candy, um, water filter tablets, highly, highly, highly underestimated. People underrate those things all the time. You need a water filter. It's like one of the most important things, water filter, because no matter what, at least you can drink. Along the road, you might find someone who has an extra, bar. You might find a little store where you can still buy stuff because maybe it's still open and no one really found it yet, so you can still buy some food. But if you don't have water, you're just in a bad situation. So definitely have water. First priority. Second priority, the dried meats. Third priority, berries, nuts, hard candies, If you can, bring some type of like tuna can or some type of dried bean situation or dried eggs. They make all these pouches that are like ready to eat type MRE, emergency preparedness meals. It's just those.
So freeze-dried food.
Yeah, freeze dried. Those are automatically designed to give you the best amount of proteins and calories that you need. But yeah, that would be my first thing.
In the military, clearly we used MREs, and MREs are vacuum sealed at high temperatures, so they don't need to be freeze dried. But freeze dried is, in my opinion, one of the ultimate foods because you can pack about 10 meals for the same weight as one meal as long as you can find your water on the move. And you have the ability to pack a lot more food into a lot less weight unless, as long as you can find water. And water's out there. You just have to be able to find it. And the problem is in a war zone or most water is natural good. You can actually drink it. But when you start getting into areas where there's humans and cattle, it starts to become contaminated with both biological contaminants and stuff like oil or the chemicals from a pulp plant, or explosions, that kind of stuff. So completely agree. All right. So pack heavy foods, have a way to filter and replace and replenish water, have some sugar, but don't make it your core thing that you're eating.
Yeah. And then last thing I would say on the food item is just, it's okay to be hungry. You don't want to starve, but it's okay to be hungry. And especially in the States, we're used to very large portions and very often. And once you start, getting in other parts of the world and stuff, as I'm sure you can attest to this, people eat differently in other parts of the world, and they just learn to live. Their bodies adapt to smaller portions, less frequent, all these types of things. You can get all the nutrients you need. We tend to overeat. So especially for the average American, if you're in a survival situation, an emergency preparedness type thing where you got to go, it's okay to be hungry. And you being hungry, most likely is probably a good thing. Maybe
more of a natural state.
Yeah, more of a natural state. And then, once it starts getting, day 2, day 3, yeah, you need to start getting those calories back. But it's okay to be a little hungry. That's not the end of the world.
Because let's talk about logistics, communications, bags, kits, that kind of thing. What communications went down? What communications functioned? How did you guys? And I don't want to ask you any questions that will endanger anything that anyone's currently doing, right? So I'll use an example. When we were in Afghanistan, we had our PACE plan. I had a primary alternative contingent emergency. Did I say them all? Primary alternative contingent emergency. Yes. Okay. PACE. Well, my brain's not working. So primary might be frequency hopping, intercom or inter squad radios. A contingency might be a sat phone. A emergency might be a Roshan phone, which is the local company or the local country phone. And clearly you use one. If it doesn't work, you use the other. If that doesn't work, you use the other. And then we had a fourth communication device that I'm going to talk about, but it was a great fail-safe. So communications, what did you guys use to facilitate communication to get people out? And what could we prep here to do the same thing if our grid went down, if our satellites go down? I know what I'm using, but what did you actually use there?
Yeah, so when we were over there, we were really blessed because Starlink, was positioned over Ukraine and things like this, and with the satellites and all that entailed, it actually let the Wi-Fi continue for the entire country. So when I went to Ukraine, it actually had better Wi-Fi than my home in California. So the country as a whole, we were in a very specific scenario because of the Starlink and because of the different things that were going on to help out Ukraine. The Wi-Fi was okay. There were still blackouts, but even during blackouts, even during sometimes when our GPS signals were jammed and things like this, we still had access to our communication. So that was good. The best thing we use is called Signal. I highly recommend Signal.
The app Signal.
Yeah, the app Signal. It's Signal, Signal. Signal it works a lot like WhatsApp, like Facebook Messenger. It's just a messaging profile, but it works a lot better and it's less. You can probably talk more about the specifics of this. we use that because some of the information we were handling was very sensitive. You know, certain families that we were trying to evacuate from certain positions that were already occupied, and certain conversations we didn't want leaked. We didn't take to WhatsApp. WhatsApp we use as a very general volunteer, hodgepodge, oh, who's going here on Sunday type of thing. And it was like no big deal. But when we had something important to talk about, or photos, especially sensitive photos, we always use Signal. From everything I've heard and from the organization I was with, Signal isn't as
Signal is secure. It's encrypted end to
yeah,
end, and I have
yep,
used it in places. It does work. And like anything, the problem with communications, I'm going to throw this in real quick, is the same problem with bullets, right? The armor gets better, the bullets get better. The armor gets better, the bullets get better. WhatsApp was the app to use until it was compromised. I think they've patched it. I don't know now. I'm not in a position to know that anymore. But I would feel more secure with Signal than WhatsApp, definitely. And Facebook Messenger is not secure whatsoever. Like all of your social media messengers, not secure. That's all open source knowledge. Everyone should know this. Whatever cell phone service you're using, your provider can see your messages unless it's encrypted through there end to end. The only thing I would add on what you've said is to maybe use a VPN that's with a company you trust. Don't be using a Chinese company or something like that. Use a company in United States or Sweden, or one of the European neutral countries, so that you have a higher probability of it being secure. Anything can eventually be broken, but it takes a lot of computer power and time, and it takes a nation state wanting to do that. So yeah, that's a good answer. Now, if you didn't have Starlink, what would you have done, or what did they do? Do you know what they're using before Starlink?
I don't. It was there from when I was there, so I don't actually know what they used before. But we did have sat phones. We had sat phones for emergency purposes if needed, because there are still lots of areas in Ukraine where there's just absolutely no cell service.
Do you
And
know what sat phone provider you're using? Because I know
um,
there's U.S. satellites that are geostationary, and there's Russian satellites that are geostationary, and those are the two major primary service providers. And then there's a couple others that exist. I don't know if Starlink has got anything yet. I hope they do.
yeah, unfortunately, I don't. The organization just provided me with the sat phone. I never had to use it, and we never talked about it. I never asked
Okay,
those questions.
okay.
And then the only other thing I would add is when it came to logistics, because we were a convoy-based operation where we were handling evacuations and delivery of different types of supplies from medical to military to food, we needed to keep track of all of our vehicles and all of our people. So what we actually used, and it worked beautifully, was we used Apple trackers. And Apple sells these $15, $30 trackers they're just little button size, and you put them in, a bag or a car or something, and that way we could keep track of vehicles in case.
Is it a one-time purchase or something they have to pay monthly? I
Um,
should
you,
know this. I don't.
yeah, I'm trying to remember. If I remember correctly, it's a monthly subscription, but it's not too much because it works off of the data.
So it
So
works off a mesh network. So essentially, any Apple phone that's in the area that can grab it will push the data
yeah, exactly.
like a node. For those of you nerdy enough to know what I'm talking about. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Apple trackers are great. Okay,
That, and then just find me on the Apple phones worked great.
awesome.
So,
That's
yep.
good to know. That's unique. The military has its own system and a couple different versions of its system that are nice, that you know where everyone is, so that you don't accidentally shoot in the direction thinking that vehicle over there is something else. So, okay, so kits good, food's good, communications. Right when it initially happened, I know I've read a lot of let's call them after action reports on places where there's been incidences from a 7-day war to Bosnia Herzegovina. And in the beginning, some things disappeared quick. In Bosnia, one of the first things that disappeared was mechanisms for lighting fire. All the matches were gone, all the lighters were gone. Some guy with one jug of fuel for a Zippo was like a king, and he was trading Zippo reloads for all sorts of crazy stuff. Is there anything that you can think of that dried up quick in the beginning that people should stock up on in order to prevent it from, like matches?
Yeah. Good question. I would say one of the most valuable commodities in Ukraine right after the war started, because it ran out so quickly, was just gasoline and diesel. People realized really quickly that they weren't that not only were they not able to get anywhere because their personal vehicles didn't have any gasoline and fuel, but also all of the public transport systems relied on that diesel and gasoline. And because nobody had it, I mean, it came to points where military personnel and different battalions and things like that would try to buy diesel and things like this from our personal stash that we needed for our cargo vans. I mean, they were so desperate to get some diesel from anywhere, because the problem was the borders were shut down. And because the borders were shut down, it took forever for all these tankers to come in from other countries to resupply all the gas stations within Ukraine. So fill up as much as you can on gas and diesel. And everyone has a different type of home situation. There's ways to cover it, plastic wrap it. That's what we did. We plastic wrapped everything so that it wouldn't smell so bad, and especially if it was in a confined area. You also
You're
have to
talking about
protect
your
it.
fuel storage?
Yeah, our fuel storage. We would just buy these big plastic containers. The best though are the metal jerry cans. Those are the best. So invest in some metal jerry cans, and try to have. I don't know. I would say just off the top of my head, try to have at least, like, I would say 100 gallons, just to be safe. It's going to be a good investment, and there's lots of ways that you wouldn't think you would need fuel, but it really does limit you, because when you're stuck because you can't drive anywhere, you're so much more helpless. So I would say gasoline and diesel, depending on what kind of car you have. And then the second thing, less like transportation wise, more just everyday life.
I've many times said most disasters are geographical in nature. So most disasters are right here and not right there. And what I mean by that is, if a bomb goes up here, you want to be somewhere else. If an earthquake happens here, you go on to go to the next state. If there's a hurricane here, right? Whatever the thing is, the safe place is not where the thing's at, right? So for a long time, I've said, if you can get one gas tank, which in most cases is 300 to 500 miles away, you're usually good. If you can get two gas tanks, now we're talking 6 to 1,000 miles away. I've just covered half of the United States. So if there's a way to store at least one or two gas tanks worth of fuel, and always have fuel in your vehicle, and store cash, because if the grid goes down, you're not using your credit cards. A quick example: a lot of the teams in Afghanistan would carry big sums of cash, because cash is king. Even some local Taliban commander will listen to cash if you pay them enough money, in some instances, and help you just for that money, right? So a big wad of cash, enough fuel to go to grandma's house, wherever that is, right, in another state over, can be the only thing that you need to get out. And I really want people to hear that. If you have a way to store fuel, if you never let your gas tank get below half a tank, especially if everyone's trying to, like in Florida, when the hurricanes come, everyone loads up the interstate and they all sit there and drive 5 miles an hour for 8 hours straight, and they just burn all that fuel out of there. There's no fuel coming down into Florida, right? And there's no tankers going in, it's all going out. So if you add an extended tank to your vehicle, if you have whatever if you've got a pickup truck and you can throw 100 gallons of fuel in the back of it, do it, cover it up and head out, right? So that's a key massive thing. Another thing I'll throw out from 9/11 was socks, right? A lot of people, when something bad happens, if you do run out of fuel, you're going to have to be walking, and socks are like tire changes for your feet. Having done a lot of road marches, one of the main things you have in your rucksack is extra pair of wool specific socks and foot powder, because if your feet break down, you're done. Okay, I had to take a quick break because my Zoom only records for so many minutes. Okay, all right, you said diesel and gas ran out, and you were mentioning something else?
Yeah, and then the second thing that ran out very quickly, that we had a big problem trying to obtain, even with the surrounding countries, we could hardly find any in Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, and that was generators, especially the smaller type generators, and then just those power banks we were talking about earlier. Those power banks that are mostly for like phone charging, laptop charging, and then anywhere from the smaller generators to, not really the big ones. No one really wanted the big heavy ones, but especially the smaller ones. So I would say buy whatever's practical for you and your situation and your family. If you have 5 people in your family and everyone has these electronic needs, maybe buy 2 or 3 power banks so that there's multiple charges for quite a while or there's just a ton of charges for one phone, and then those small generators can help with that as well. And then everything else. Oh, do you have a comment on that?
In fact, I was gonna say you could probably have one anchor tank per person, a generator, maybe even a propane generator. I've got an Alp propane generator that runs really quietly. It's only 1,000 watts, but I don't think you want to run a 3,000 watt generator with using up all your fuel to charge your cell phones. But I bet if you had a 1,000 watt Alp generator running an anchor tank for each person, you could turn it on once a week and just charge those guys up overnight and then be good by the next morning. I don't know about you where you're at right now, but gas is really expensive. Propane is looking better and better every time I refill up those tanks. I was also thinking maybe if you had the ability and the money to put up a solar array with like a Tesla battery or something, you could charge up e-vehicles. You could charge up something that might give you 50 miles of range, some sort of an e-bike of some sort. And that way you've excluded fuel. I'm all about saving fuel. I grew up on a ranch and we had 2 big fuel tanks on stilts. One was diesel and one was gas. And because we were so far out in the middle of nowhere, you couldn't like drive your tractor to town to fill it up, right? So
yeah, I agree. The solar panels are definitely the way to go. The only problem with the solar panels is with the average family's economic situation of the places that we were. It just wasn't, it's not something, first of all, it's not something that you can just buy like that and then set up.
Expensive.
Yeah. And then second of all, yeah, it's just not, anyway, start where you can, but definitely power banks and the generators. But, everything else was okay. Like there were food shortages, but the food shortages would have been a lot worse if the Ukrainian people weren't so skilled at gardening and growing their own food and foraging for mushrooms. And they just have such a close connection with the land that they weren't as worried about food shortages because they know how to kind of deal with, gardening and, understanding which types of things are edible and which aren't edible. That's one of the downfalls we have here in the States. We're so advanced technologically that we've really lost our touch when it comes to the land. So I would highly encourage people, just get used to gardening, get used to preparing foods, from a garden. What does that actually look like? How does that actually feel? What does that actually taste like? And that way, when situations like this happen, you'll be way ahead of the game, especially if you already have a garden. I mean, a lot of these Ukrainian families, they had gardens, they had apple trees, they had, apricot trees, they had blackberry bushes, they had these, cucumbers already growing. And so it gives such a big sense of relief when you have that storage naturally, and you can harvest the seeds from all of your produce and then plant it right back. Food shortage was a problem, but it was remedied pretty quickly. So I wouldn't. That's obviously something you want in your kits. But as far as a country as a whole, the things that ran out the quickest, it was the generators, the batteries, and the gas and diesel.
Makes total sense. World War II and the Great Depression, I argue, were remedied by the ability to grow your own food. The problem is you got to start now or a month or two ago in order to have stuff for the fall. And then you've got to can it to eat during the winter. And then you've got to start the process again early, and you have to diversify. You have to have different. I have the corn and the beets and the squash and the potatoes, right? You can't, and they all flower at a different time, and they all yield fruit at a different time. So I think that's spot on. I would also maybe add chickens, rabbits, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chickens specifically will eat all of your leftovers. They are like little garbage hoovers, right? And then they create as long as you can mix it with other stuff, they make great soil that can go back into your garden. And now I realize that's expensive. I grew up in a ranch, but now I don't have a lot of these things and I want to integrate it myself. So I get the fact that it's kind of expensive. And we were talking about solar panels a minute ago. $16,000 what we spent to put solar panels on my house that I lived on prior. So yeah, it can be a lot of money. Okay.
Can I just give one quick plug-in? Not this isn't like an endorsement or anything, but it's been very helpful. This guy, his name is Joel Salatin. If you have any questions or you're looking to get started on this like gardening type stuff, homesteading type stuff for emergency preparedness, look up this guy Joel Salatin.
Does he have a link or a name or something? I mean, if it works, I don't care who it is, I'll plug him.
Yeah, he has books. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's on YouTube. He has his own website.
Okay. Yeah. Does he have a company name?
He does. Yeah, Polyface Farms.
Okay. Yeah. Check that out. Leave comments in the bottom if that's helpful. Individual kits. Let's talk a little bit about security as well. I'm a soldier. I'm a big fan of security. I like to be able to shoot back. Right. What do you suggest people have as far as that's concerned?
Are you, by your question, you mean securing your own things, or you mean like what type of weapons?
Anything. So I know I have training on a myriad of different foreign weapons. I've got a lot of training on Glocks and M4s and those type of things. I know you there as a civilian. I don't know if you're able to be armed while you were there or not. Just give me your feedback on that. If people, there's always the question, how many bullets are enough bullets? How many bullets are too much bullets, right? Or bullets are beans, right? Just give me your thoughts on that. Should people have weapon systems to defend themselves, to hunt? If so, what? And what did you see over there that you thought maybe we could integrate here by learning from what just happened?
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, good question. Okay, so a couple things. First, I'll talk about like the tool side of things, and then I'll talk about personal securing, like securing your things once you have them or the things you already have. So first of all, tools are too underrated. You got to have an axe. You got to have some type of axe type tool, whether that's a pickaxe or an actual axe. It could be double bladed, it could be a maul, it really doesn't matter, but I would highly recommend some type of axe because it works both as a hammer and as a cutting tool. So you need that heavy and blunt and sharp object all in one, and the axe is the best bet for that. So purchase an axe. That would be my first thing. Second thing is, if you can have a knife, then get a knife, depending on what the situation is and how likely it is. And then as far as knives go, I'll just throw out this rule of thumb. Obviously, you don't want like a sword. I mean, you might want a sword, but I'm talking just knives. And when it comes to knives, it's better to have one that's maybe a little too long rather than too short. So if you have to err on the side of too long, you can always use less of a knife blade, but you can't create more of a knife blade. So go longer, don't go shorter, and don't do flippies. No flippies. They're just not reliable. So you got to get a full tang type blade. And there's so many resources for that, and they're lots of fun to buy and stuff like this. Anyway, axe, knife, and then last thing, if you can't have a gun, have a gun. I would absolutely recommend that. Unfortunately, as a civilian, I wasn't able to carry in Ukraine, and if I was caught, I would have gotten in big trouble, and I probably wouldn't have been allowed back in the country. So I didn't want to take any types of risks, and I wasn't at enough fear for my own life to be able to take those types of risks. So that's just something I lived with, and I'm fine with that. So if you can, yes. And then the second aspect I would talk about is just personal security. You don't want to, especially if you had things like wads of cash, if you have your personal savings and you have, a collection of cash for these emergency preparedness times, you don't want to just leave it and not have it accessible. First of all, if your house is burning down or you have to go right now. I remember one of my friends, this family, it was her, she was a single mother, her husband had passed away the year before, and her son was 12 years old. So it was just her and her son, and they had 1 hour to leave. So imagine imagine start to finish, you're not ready for almost anything. You have to pack everything you can possibly think of that you'll need. You don't know where you're going yet. You don't know how long you'll be gone yet. You don't even know what's going on yet. What are you going to pack? And you only have an hour. And one of the things she brought was her gun. She brought a personal firearm. So it just kind of puts it in perspective. If you only have a limited amount of time, you don't want to be fumbling with your case to open up, to get your cash and all this stuff. You want to have it in uh, some type of container or something that's not too easy to get into, but also not so hard to get into that you waste all your time doing it. Me personally,
Like a
I have
bug out kit, you can just grab and go.
yeah, exactly. And then when you're on the go, I don't like it in the pockets. What I had was I had this necklace that worked as a pouch, and it was underneath my clothes at all times, and I had a lot of cash in there. I never had any problems with any theft. We did, as an organization, we did unfortunately have problems, but because my cash was always underneath my shirt, it gave the impression that it was just like a passport holder type thing. I don't know, but that's what I would do personally. Keep it on your body. They also have concealed carry type braces that you can wear underneath your clothing. Those I really like those, and some of them even have pouches. They have little zippers in the center. So definitely get something like that to hold all your belongings on yourself. And then as far as your backpacks and stuff go, you got to have the right kind of bag. You got to have the right kind of backpack that you can just grab and go. You don't want to be fumbling, packing, missing things. You want everything ready before you go.
Excellent. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up for now because the video is getting kind of long. Is is there anything you saw that really sticks out that you thought, if anything like that goes down here in the US, I wish I would know that? As an example, when the trade towers went down, people needed running shoes because they're going to walk home. So is there anything you can think of that people really should prepare for? I mean, we've got gas storage, power storage, food storage that's quality food, water storage, and the ability to purify it. Security somehow, a lot of that personal on your body security. Cash is king over credit. Encryption is important, but you can't use it without power. What else can you think that we can drop with them?
Good question. So I'm going to answer the question by talking about the biggest thing that I noticed while I was in Ukraine to apply to the US and to myself, to, what I'm used to. And that is, if you never expose yourself to any type of training or preparation or, uncomfortable situations that can help you in these situations before the situations begin, then you're going to be at a serious disadvantage when the situations do begin. I saw so many Ukrainians that had grit just because of their lives and the things that they had been through already, that for them, even though it was a terrible thing and it was a catastrophe, they were able to pull through it, and they were able to pull through it pretty quickly because just their life, they knew what to do. They weren't helpless. They didn't, it's not like they never, they understood their city. I mean, you would not imagine how many Americans I know, because I asked so many Americans about Northwest, East, South. So many Americans don't even know what the difference is between North, South, East, and West. And they don't understand how to orient themselves just with the sun, or just with the moon, or they don't understand the orientation of a map. It's really, really simple things. You don't think you'll need to ever really know that information. But when you have to walk, and the only words, the quickest thing that the so-and-so checkpoint person, officer on the phone can tell you is start heading west of the city, start heading west of the, I-5, and then you'll see us. We're right south of the overpass. It's like in that moment, you don't have time to be thinking, okay, what's west, what's south, what the heck is the I-5? Like, I don't even know where to walk. And then you're just screwed. You're already screwed. You haven't even started. But in those moments, you don't really have time to think. You got to start orienting yourself for those types of things now. And the stories I heard, just story after story after story, the biggest lesson I would say that we could use, especially here in the States, is just get used to some type of, training, or just open a map, start reading books, start dabbling in a different language. Anything that you think could make you a better asset, start doing. It'll change your mentality. It'll lead you to the next thing, which will lead you to the next thing. It'll lead you to a network. You'll start building a better, suited network for this kind of thing. And when stuff happens, you won't be so uncomfortable because the people who suffered the most were the people who were least prepared. And obviously the people who actually suffered the most in Ukraine were the people who were closest to Russia. And that's, I mean, how do you prepare for that? That's a hard question. But as far as just everyone else who had the opportunity to leave, the people who suffered the least on their exodus outside of Ukraine were the people who were most prepared. Some people didn't know English at all, and they were at a way disadvantage than people who knew English even a little bit. People who had never left their home city, way at a disadvantage than people who were a little bit comfortable with travel because they had traveled, more than 4 hours in their lifetime outside their city. Just little things like this that you never think would be an issue become an issue because everything is, extrapolated to the 1,000th degree.
That's
So
perfect.
that's the thing I would say.
You're just regurgitating my mantra I've been chatting for years to people. Training, right? You don't think you're going to throw a 40-pound rock on and hump for 20 miles and be just okay with that unless you regularly throw a 40-pound rock on and hump for 20 miles, right? So training is extremely important. I know on this channel we're talking about putting together regional training for people with some bug out practices. So look forward to that. Thank you, Oliver, for the video. I'll chat with you when I hang this up. If you have questions or comments, do you want to come on the channel again?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you've got questions that you want to ask him, if you'll leave them in the comment section right now, I will ask him and see if we can articulate in a way that we can do a functional after action review and learn from his experiences in the country. Hit the subscribe button, check us out on Rumble, leave your comments below, and thank you for watching.